Thursday, the 18th of March, 2021, and you're listening to Skeptics with a K, the podcast for science, reason, and critical thinking. Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society, a non-profit organisation for the promotion of scientific skepticism on Merseyside around the UK and internationally. I am your host, Mike Hall. With me today is Marsh.
Hello.
And Alice.
Hello.
So I mentioned on the show, the last show that we did, that I was currently looking for work, and I've been wall-to-wall job interviews since then, to an absurd degree. We've had listeners writing in going, "Hey, I work for a company. Do you want to come work for us?" Which is really nice. I didn't expect that, including somebody from Apple, which was like, "Well, blimey, okay." But that's been really nice. That's been really positive. But I've never done so many technical demos in my life. It's a long time since I've had to go out and look for work.
Yeah, normally what you do is you set up your own company and start working for that, which is sort of like an advanced form of nepotism.
So I've been absolutely rammed the last 2 weeks. I'm absolutely shattered, as well as there's a load of family stuff going on that I don't want to get into on air, but it's just I'm absolutely wrecked. I don't know about you folks.
Yeah, I'm knackered. I'm sort of done with this all now. I'm very sick of it all. I've had to cut my own hair, which has come out better than I thought it would be, but I'd still rather a proper haircut. I'm living my life currently on 2 alerts on a daily basis.
Right.
One of which is the alert that tells me when the sun sets, so I can slowly watch the days get longer on my phone. So I get a little message every time the sun sets. I go, "Oh, the sun just set," and I can just see that it's been a couple of extra minutes per day, clawing them back from the Reaper there.
Good.
And the other one is I've got a Twitter alert set up for an account called Jabometer, which just tracks the percentage of UK adults who've been given their first dose of vaccine, and just tweets out every day when the official government figures are released.
Nice.
So as of recording, it's at 47.7% of UK adults.
Good.
Vaccinated. A further 257,000 were vaccinated in the last 24 hours. And it's got a little kind of update bar, little progress bar towards percent. So between those 2 alerts that I get on a daily basis, it's the only thing keeping me functioning.
And yet only 33% of this podcast has received their vaccination, so we are well behind the curve in terms of the statistical average.
Well, that's because Alice is vaccine hesitant. She's just refusing. She just thinks the science is an idiot.
I am also knackered. Since the last episode, I have taken a week off work because I just needed to essentially sleep for a week, so I was knackered. And then I've had an entire week just scrolling Twitter constantly. I think that will be true of pretty much every woman who listens to our show, particularly the ones based in the UK, will have been scrolling their Twitter feeds, reading its wall-to-wall discussions about the Sarah Everard case and all the discussions that have been ongoing from that. So that has been my life for the last week, and I'm tired of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's understandable for sure, but it's obviously awful. And it feels like, in the same way I remember on the show when George Floyd died, and then there was the international protests, the Black Lives Matter movement, and those kind of overall protests for racial justice. And we talked on the show about what the role of skepticism is in that. And the role of skepticism wasn't to say, well, actually, it's not as bad as you think. It was to say there's a lot of information out there that a lot of people haven't been able to accept because of their own pride and their own biases. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing now. Everyone taking stock, or at least everyone should be taking stock of what this actually means, that what their previous behaviours have. And I think there's a lot of men out there who have assumed that things are a lot more simple, a lot rosier, a lot easier for people who aren't them than they actually are, who need to really put themselves in someone else's shoes. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing, really, or trying to see.
It's really interesting as a woman who's existed on the internet for a long while, because we have these conversations quite regularly. The last big one was the conversations that came out of the Me Too stuff. And these discussions, they periodically spiral up. And obviously, for listeners who haven't been following, so this was sparked by a young woman called Sarah Everard, who went missing in London at the beginning of this month. Her body has subsequently been found, and a man has been arrested for her murder. And all over social media and in various other places, there have been conversations about the safety of women walking. She was walking home from a friend's house at 9 o'clock at night. It should not have been a dangerous time to be walking home alone. and it should not be dangerous for women to walk home alone. Mm-hmm. And so there has been a big conversation around that. That has really skyrocketed in very similar ways that George Floyd was a trigger point for a conversation on race issues that we just haven't reached in the same way before. These conversations have been going on for years, and I've been part of these conversations for years, but it feels different this time. And I think we would say it felt different when we had the Black Lives Matter conversation as a result of George Floyd's death as well.
Sure.
And I don't know what that is and why it feels different, but it definitely does. As a woman who's been on the internet for a long time, seeing these conversations happening, being part of these conversations, it is different. And I think one of the reasons it's different is because the right people are getting involved in it now. It's not just women having the conversation anymore and talking almost into the void or what feels like into the void with some of the great men who are in support of the right issues, who every time these conversations come up say the right things and are supportive of women and are shocked if it's their first time hearing about it, are shocked at some of the dangers that women face or the discomforts that women face when they exist in the world as a woman. And I'm not just speaking about cisgendered women. This is anybody who is perceived as a woman. And it's interesting that, you know, you have these conversations time and time again, and there are a lot of people who are like, yeah, so I'm one of the good guys, so what do I do? And now those conversations are changing, that the good guys are saying, okay, no, really, what do I do? What can we do? How can we fix this? And that's a real change and interesting, I think.
Yeah, and it's that thing of people will get to a point where they say, well, I'm one of the good guys, so it's fine. In the same way as, well, I'm not racist, so it's fine. As long as everyone...
It's not my responsibility because I'm a good person.
Yeah, I'm one of the good people. Yeah. I'm not racist. I don't do these things, and therefore my behaviour don't need to be examined. And I think that's a very damaging mindset, or very unhelpful mindset to get into, because it kind of, first of all, leads to a societal paralysis where you're not actually then trying to affect any change yourself.
Which leaves the responsibility with the victims.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing it does is it means people don't examine their own behaviour because they think that, well, my behaviour is fine.
Yeah.
And so they don't really think about, well, have I always been great towards women? Have I always had the right kind of, have I always kind of explored my own inherent biases when it comes to conversations around race? And obviously we won't get into the conversation around race because that would be detracting from what we're actually talking about here. And that's the last thing we want to do. But I think that idea of, well, I'm fine, therefore everything I do must be fine, therefore I don't need to examine it, I think, again, just leads to to stasis. And one of the things that I was sort of thinking about this is, I remember there's been men who've come along to skeptical events whose behaviour we know has been not right. And it took us a while to realise it was our responsibility to show them, to kick them out, basically, rather than to say, well, you know, we can model the fact that we're not all of that ilk, and that's enough. And actually, it's not enough. It's important that we do create an environment where it's very, very clear that if you're going to be like that, you're going to get kicked out. You're not going to be welcome there. And I think that's why QED, for example, where we've taken action in the past around people who've made women feel uncomfortable, including one of our speakers who went on to be exposed in BuzzFeed, in a way to try and show that you can't have any tolerance for that kind of thing. And one of the things that kind of struck me is there's people I know who will be hearing these conversations and seeing the stuff happening, saying, well, you know, that's extreme stuff, but that's different to the odd joke here and there and banter about this. And, you know, I'm just kind of having a laugh. And if women can't take a joke and that kind of stuff. And I see this from like even family members occasionally on Facebook. And one of the things that strikes me is that I am as confident as one could be that my family member isn't then going on to be dangerous towards people. Now, obviously I say as confident as one could be because you have literally no idea, because everyone will be confident that friends aren't doing these things, and yet these things are happening all the time. So we are wrong about how
somebody's friends are doing them.
Yeah, exactly. But even if my cousin or whoever who says the odd thing on Facebook, even if they are only saying the odd joke and they mean it as a joke because they just like to tell edgy jokes and stuff like that, the point is that their friends don't necessarily know that the edgy joke is just an edgy joke and isn't an instruction about how to behave.
Sure.
And it just all creates a culture where someone somewhere, the person down the line who may be predisposed towards seeing people as objects, will see that as indicative of, well, actually it's fine because we all think this. So when I go ahead and do something like that, that's absolutely fine because someone was making a joke about it the other day. Someone was talking about it. So it's all part of the culture, and therefore it's perfectly fine for me to do that. And I think in those places, we have to make it absolutely clear that those kind of comments, those kind of views, those kind of attitudes, even if said in jest, aren't welcome, aren't acceptable, because they just contribute to a society that continues to put women at risk.
Yeah, and I think that's really an interesting thing to really dig down into, because it's one thing I've seen a lot of on social media lately, including from some quite high profile people, are claims that, well, you know, serious violence and serious assaults are rare, therefore we shouldn't be tarring men with this brush. And for me, I think that idea is so damaging, because it's more than just that. You know, if we just say, well, we don't need to worry about it because it's only people who will go on to commit serious crimes, then we're missing the fact that there are people, committing what we currently consider more minor crimes,
who will then go on to commit a serious crime because they're allowed. They see there's no pushback against the minor transgressions, ingressions that they're doing now. Yeah.
But also, it's not okay for women to go to an event and expect to be made to feel uncomfortable because of her gender and because of men at those events. And we, as you said before, Marsh, we've had situations where there's been people at events that we've hosted who have made people feel uncomfortable in certain ways. And we've always tried to take action. We've always tried to have conversations about these things. We've sometimes made the wrong decisions about what the correct action is. And I think that's in large part because there is this culture around being fair to the person who's accused. If there's no evidence, then we have to give them the benefit of the doubt. But if somebody is repeatedly making your attendees at an event that you are hosting uncomfortable, as organisers, you are well within your right to say, look, your behaviour is not appropriate. We need to have this conversation with you to change your behaviour and to believe the people who are saying this person makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. And the thing about the benefit of the doubt is it's all well and good to say we as a society have to give people the benefit of the doubt. But in the real situation where women are being attacked and assaulted and you know, everything that we know happens, from the thing that might be considered small all the way up to the thing that is obviously much more greater in magnitude. But all of those things, the benefit of the doubt in that situation, if women were to give every man the benefit of the doubt, they would be put more at risk. You have to have a precautionary principle of the 1,000 men you might meet, only 2 of them might be a risk, for example, number off the top of my head. But if you don't treat everyone with that level of precaution, then you put yourself at risk of those 2 people. And that's why we need to make it clear that, you know, those behaviors are not acceptable anywhere, and men have to challenge that. If we want the benefit of the doubt, we have to earn it by challenging the people who do these things. And when we see it, and we've seen it, every man has seen guys acting inappropriately and has felt in that moment even a level of cowardice of, well, maybe I shouldn't intervene because they'll kick the shit out of me, or maybe I shouldn't intervene because it's socially awkward. Yeah. But the social awkwardness of your intervention is less than the social awkwardness of being the victim receiving that and seeing that no one's helping.
Or maybe even not feeling like you want to intervene because you don't want to patronise the woman. Mm-hmm. And I think there's plenty of good men who would say, you know, it seems like she's got a handle on this. And maybe she has, but it's down to men to be able to challenge each other and say, look, mate, that's not cool. You need to stop doing that.
I've definitely been in that position. I've been in a position where I've seen a woman taking verbal abuse from somebody, but thought, well, it's patronising of me to intervene on her behalf and say, well, hang on a second, you can't talk to somebody like that. And afterwards, she was like, well, why didn't you stick up for me? And I was like, well, I thought, you know, it's not for me to come in and say, all right, settle down, little girl, I can handle this. But that's not actually what I would have been doing. She actually wanted me to step up and stick up for her in that instance at that moment. So she felt safe because my silence was taken as being complicit, as being endorsement. And I'm 100% confident that there are women in the past who I have made to feel uncomfortable by my behavior. And I've never done that deliberately, but that's not to say that it hasn't happened, that there are people who have been made to feel uncomfortable because of things that I've done and said. And I feel mortified that that is the case, but I need to recognize that that is my responsibility and I need to be modifying my behavior to try and make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that, you know, we'll have listeners, skepticism is a very male, or has been traditionally a very male-dominated community. I think it's less so these days than it used to be. And I think part of the reason it's less so than it used to be is because there are groups out there actively trying to make it clear that this is a space that women are allowed, can exist in. but there still remains pushback to that. And we see even kind of reactionary elements of skepticism, and people leaning towards fucking Jordan Peterson, which somehow skeptics end up being fans of him, when what we see there is a very reactionary conservative gender role view. But we will know that there's people in skepticism, and probably people listening to this who'll say, well, I know I'm a good guy, so all of this is kind of overblown, and the not all men kind of bullshit, and well, actually, if I could just devil's advocate for a second, what about in this hypothetical scenario, missing the fact that there are some very real non-hypothetical scenarios, which are the ones we're talking about. And I'd much rather put myself in discomfort to avoid the real harms than to continue to put people in real harm to avoid any hypothetical discomfort of the back of a hypothetical. But with all of this, one of the many things that came to mind when these kind of conversations are coming up is, it's almost as if someone needs to tell men, for example, in the skeptical movement, that you need to be thinking about your behavior around women, not from what your intent is. I know I don't intend anything bad and therefore it's all fine, but how could I be coming across, and what is the possible perceptions of this, and modify your behavior to make sure that the possible perceptions of what you're doing aren't threatening. So, for example, if you were in a lift with a woman, don't invite her up to your room for coffee when you're just locked in a metal box with her, because you've got the purest of intentions of just having a nice chat and a nice time or whatever with someone. But on the other hand, she would see that as, I'm in a locked metal box with a stranger who's now propositioning me. I don't know how to get out of this for certain without there being a whatever percentage chance that this guy isn't going to take a polite no well. And these are conversations that went on a decade ago. And I guarantee there's still people who'd be listening to this now thinking, well, I think that's unfair because, not all men are like that. And maybe women just need to toughen up, and all the same kind of stereotypical sexist tropes that we've seen. And I think I can understand why women look at this situation now and say, enough. We've had the enough is enough a billion times now. It's time for men to actually take responsibility for the violence and threat that are perpetrated on women by men and perpetrated on people by men.
Yeah, and this is a thing, like keeping it relevant to skepticism, and clearly this is a much wider issue, but we're a skeptical podcast talking to skeptics. I, as a woman who has given talks at Skeptics in the Pub groups across the country, have been made to feel incredibly welcome at Skeptics in the Pub groups across the country. I have not encountered any organisers that are problematic. I've been welcomed. I have had organisers be considerate to my needs as a young woman. I have been walked back to my hotel if that was something that I wanted. I have been well looked after and had good experiences at Skeptic in the Pub groups events around the country, but I've still been uncomfortable at Skeptic events. I have still been made to feel uncomfortable at Skeptic events, not necessarily by the people who are the core part of the group, but by people who happen to be in the pub or are fleeting members of that group, or whatever else. There is never a time when you as a woman go to events in pubs like this, especially if you're going on your own, especially if you're a younger woman, where you're not made to feel uncomfortable in some way or other. And the discourse now needs to be, just because we're doing really well as a group doesn't mean there isn't more we could be doing. Just because I'm doing well as an individual doesn't mean there isn't more I could be doing. I could be taking that responsibility of being switched on all the time, just like the women at these events have to be, because you have to be if you're out in public, particularly in a pub in an evening. Maybe I could have my radar on, looking for risks, looking for threats, looking for that person who looks like they might be waiting for an opportunity to make somebody feel uncomfortable. That's something we try to do at our events. We always have our eyes on the audience to see what's happening, but we still miss things, and we try to make our attendees feel comfortable enough to talk to us about it. And we try to have policies in place where they can tell us if something has happened that's made them feel uncomfortable. But it's, you have to kind of be active on it. It's not just assuming, well, I never see it, so it mustn't be that big an issue. It's maybe you never see it because you're not really looking.
But like I say, there are the people who, look to make people feel uncomfortable, or look to push the boundaries and look to sort of push at people's comfort levels and people's personal space and things. But there are also the people in every movement, and maybe more so in skepticism than lots of movements, who just through their own social awkwardness might not realize that they're being uncomfortable, because what they'll think is, well, I know I don't intend anything by this, so I must assume that the person I'm talking to must also get this. And what we need to get into is the mindset of it doesn't matter. Your intent doesn't matter. The perception of your intent, the perception of what your actions are is what matters. When there is a non-zero chance that somebody could be a problem, and the person who's going to be on the receiving end of that unwanted attention on whatever end of the spectrum that is, needs to be aware of that and needs to be looking out for it. So you need to be aware of how you could be being perceived and act accordingly. Yeah.
And men in these groups just have to be mates to other men. Like if you see somebody you know making women feel uncomfortable and you know them really well and you're pretty confident that they don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, but they're, for whatever awkward reason, doing it by mistake, that's a perfect opportunity for you to have that conversation with that person and say, look, I think when you behave this way, you might make people feel uncomfortable. Maybe you could consider how that behaviour could be adjusted.
It took me a long time to get over the idea that I'd be walking down the street and there'd be a woman walking towards me and she would cross the street to avoid me. And I found that very hurtful and very upsetting for a long time, because I'm like, well, what's wrong with me? Why are you crossing the street to avoid me? And it took me a long time to dawn. There's a 6-foot skinhead walking towards her. Of course she's going to cross the fucking street. It's not a commentary on me as an individual or as a person. It's just there's this big looming bloke walking towards her. Well, of course she's going to do that. And I can't really blame her for it.
So, as listeners know, I currently work in academia. I am a research scientist at postdoctoral level, and my salary comes from a grant funded by an EU framework, which was awarded to my principal investigator, or PI, and is administrated by a university.
Yeah, we know you're a postdoc because we did the drunk episode to celebrate you getting your doc.
We did,
yeah.
That's true.
So I have multiple responsibilities to my funding body, to my PI, my principal investigator, and to my university. It's more than just research. As well as the experimental research done to fulfill the requirements of the grant, there are also manuscripts to write, students to teach, presentations to deliver, side projects to work on, an entire lab to maintain, meetings to join, orders to place, and relationships to maintain. There are pros and cons to being a postdoc. The biggest downside in my eyes is the lack of stability. We typically have fixed-term contracts. My shortest was 3 months, though that is quite uncommon, and my longest has been 3 years. And at the end of each contract, you essentially have to choose to stick or twist. There are a few different options as an early career researcher. Do you do another postdoc? You might be lucky enough to stay in the group you're in, but then it might be frowned upon that you didn't progress to a different institute. You might move to a different institute in another city and uproot your entire life, which some would argue benefits your career, but certainly doesn't benefit your relationships. And if you don't do another postdoc, you have a few other options. You could leave academia altogether, find another career path, or you could progress to the next stage within academia. Often that's looking at applying for your own funding, a fellowship position on your way to running your own lab, or being a principal investigator. But being a PI in a university is tough. Your responsibilities grow exponentially. You must continually apply for funding to keep your research going. You need to earn the funding that allows you to develop new ideas and progress in interesting and innovative directions. In order to implement that research, you need funding for your own team of researchers, postdoctoral researchers like me, or perhaps PhD students. Then you're managing an entire team of human beings, people who need support and education and training. And you need to help those researchers design and develop their own research projects to find their own independence and confidence. You'll usually be managing several grants, funding several projects, so you have responsibilities to each of your separate funding bodies, which might include meetings with collaborators across the world. And this on its own is a full-time job. But you also have greater responsibilities to your institution. I teach students pretty much one-on-one, and that's a lot of work. I'll teach 2 or 3 PhD students or master's students or undergraduate students and help them design and manage their own projects and teach them how to work in a lab. But as a PI, you're often doing that, as well as designing entire undergraduate modules, lecturing to hundreds of students at a time. You have your own tutor groups to support, exams to write and mark, essay questions to set and mark. And in some fields and some universities, for some academics, a lectureship position is a full-time job in its own right. But for many academics, it's something you do on top of your other full-time job. These are like teaching and research contract positions. On top of all of that, you have to do a load of other administrative things. You have to deliver talks at conferences and in normal times travel to and from those conferences, which might be on the other side of the world. You need to write papers and reviews and help your team of researchers do the same. You need to review papers for journals for free in your spare time. And I'm sure I'm missing lots of things that PIs have to do. It varies from university to university, from field to field. But hopefully you get an idea that it's not an easy job. I could talk for hours about how academia is broken. Human beings are not built to do quite so much work. And because it's hard, because it's impossible for a lot of people, like actually impossible, many people cannot sustain that sort of work. There's this ethos among some that the intensity is a good thing, which is true of many other difficult careers. There's this glorification of unhealthy levels of hard work. This unspoken idea that if you haven't had a breakdown, you're not working hard enough. The emails sent in the middle of the night, the work done on Christmas Day, the holidays not taken, the holidays taken so you have a few days to write a grant without the other pressures. The idea that some people just can't hack it, and the idea that you have to sacrifice a lot for the love of scientific research and progression. This is really sad. We lose some of our best and brightest long before they reach PI level. And that sort of solves a problem. There aren't enough top-level positions for everyone who does a PhD and goes on to do a postdoc. We have to whittle them down somehow.
So you just burn out the ones and just only promote the ones who manage to survive the burn?
Currently, that is essentially, for a lot of people, that's how it works.
Academic Darwinism is what it is.
So we're in a position where people are giving everything they have to their science, taking on responsibility for their team and their students, and barely keeping their heads above water. And if they're part of any group that has to work a little bit harder, if they're marginalised in any way, they're also swimming against a current. Some people would argue that's the way it should be, that top-level academics should be the best of the best. And I agree they should be the best of the best, but being the best isn't just about your ability to work in a way that is damaging for people's physical and mental health.
Yeah, that's like when people mistake survival of the fittest to be, well, which of these is an actual stronger creature, and therefore just, pure strength is not the only measure of fitness. And similarly, being the best isn't necessarily you can plough through as much work possible while also burning out your mental health.
These are lessons Mike should also learn.
So how much of this do you feel personally attacked by, Mike?
So far, this whole episode has been atting me. So far.
Being a good scientist is about being creative and innovative and dedicated and inquisitive. It's about thinking critically and asking questions. It's about compassion and collaboration. It should be possible to be a good scientist and to go home at the end of the day and spend time with your children, your friends, or your partners. It should be possible to be a good scientist and have a disability. This time last year, just like for many other workers in many other industries, academia got even harder. Sure, we had less time in labs through COVID, though for many PIs, lab time is not something they get a lot of time for anyway. But for those with teaching responsibilities, the workload leapt up. They had to figure out how to teach remotely with very little guidance on how to do this. There's very little research on how we can effectively teach remotely. They had to redesign modules, record lectures, all while homeschooling or figuring out how to find space in their homes to work, or figuring out how to work alongside others in their household, or how to handle complete isolation if they were living alone. God, this is a really long introduction. I'm sorry, but I think the context is important.
Well, what I really want to talk about today is cancer.
Yeah, to understand what we need to talk about today, I'm going to first talk you through the first university and how the idea of a university first came about. So let's go back 6,000 years to ancient Sumeria. So,
when universities around the country started talking about redundancies in the middle of a pandemic, people were understandably upset. To the end of January, The Guardian reported that at least 9 universities were planning redundancies. They wrote, in London, the University and College Union is fighting potential job losses at 3 institutions, the University of East London, Goldsmiths and Senate House, University of London. Elsewhere, redundancies are planned at the universities of Liverpool, Leeds, Leicester, Southampton, Solent, Brighton and Dundee. What many of these redundancy proposals have in common, as far as I can tell, is a lack of transparency. The reason particular staff members have been or will be selected is not clear at many of these institutions. And actually, I think it's more than 9 now. The last number I read was 12 universities are making redundancies. Some say they specifically say they're not making any judgment on the performance of their staff, while others, like the University of Liverpool, have given criteria that are perceived as particularly problematic across the academic community. So let's talk more about what's happening at the University of Liverpool. First, full disclosure, that is my university. I am employed by the University of Liverpool. Everything I will talk about in this piece is information that is publicly available. I will not share any emails that I've had or any other discussions that I've had that are not publicly available. Any opinions expressed in this piece are mine personally. They do not reflect the opinions of my PI, my funding body, or my university.
Does that also apply to my opinions?
No, they're yours personally and don't apply to my PI, my funding body, or my university.
Okay. Because if you're saying that any opinion shared in this entire section are yours, then me and Mike can have a fucking field day.
On the other hand, any of my opinions are the opinion of Alice's PI and the University of Liverpool.
In June 2019, the University of Liverpool Faculty of Health and Life Sciences, which is my faculty, announced new plans for a strategic realignment or restructuring with the stated goal of improving health outcomes throughout the Liverpool City region and beyond. Professor Louise Kenny, the Pro-Vice-Chancellor for the faculty, said, Project SHAPE, which is what the project was called, will enable us to realign our expertise through a new structure and vision which enables us to work in a more agile way and respond to unmet societal needs locally, nationally and globally. And the article that was published on the university website said, the plans aim to deliver world-class research-connected teaching and to deliver scientific research excellence with societal impact. This will provide the very best environment for tomorrow's students and create a platform for the university to engage in effective partnership, working across the region to translate our fundamental research strengths into life-changing benefits both locally and globally. Phase 1 of the project was to map out a new structure. They created 4 new institutes and 4 supporting directorates, which were implemented at the beginning of this pandemic. They'd been discussed before then, but that's when they were brought into place. And then came phase 2. So in a recent statement from the university, they described phase 2 this way. The University of Liverpool is currently engaged in the formal process of collective consultation with trade unions about the proposed redundancies in the university's Faculty of Health and Life Sciences as part of Project SHAPE. I'll come back to this statement later because it's one of the more recent developments, but I specifically don't want to misrepresent the university in any way, so I want to use their words, how they have publicly described this particular process as part of phase 2. So this update came from the University of Liverpool in March, but the story had been circling for months prior to that, with The Guardian reporting on January the 22nd that staff at Liverpool University learned this week there would be 47 redundancies in the Faculty of Health and Life Sciences. I will say that the university did contact staff across the faculty regarding these redundancies prior to the Guardian article going out, which I received as a member of staff in the faculty, but since it's not a publicly available email, I'm not going to share the details, just to say that the staff weren't left entirely in the dark by the university. They did send some sort of correspondence. You might think from what I've said that these redundancies are hypothetical. They talk about this formal process of collective consultation and about proposed redundancies. And according to the university, they still are, but that does not mean that the 47 people at risk of redundancy have not been made aware that they are at risk. I'm not sure of the details of how all of those individuals were made aware or how they've been supported since, but we do know that they're aware. Firstly, I know this because a listener to our show contacted us to ask us to talk about this and let us know that she was one of the 47. Secondly, because some anonymised comments from those 47 people are available on a website that has been put together by those trying to share this story. So I'd like to read some of the comments because I think there's some important information in them. So there are comments from 10 of these academics on this website. There's loads of other stuff on the website, but amongst it is comments from 10 of the academics who've been identified at risk of redundancy. One person said, I am one of the 47 members of academic staff that the HLS faculty has targeted for compulsory redundancy. When I received the email inviting me to a meeting with my head of institute to discuss this, it was like a kick in the teeth and I felt physically sick. Such was the shock, I didn't feel able to tell my partner about the letter and the threat of redundancy for 3 days. Now, on reflection, I feel let down by an employer that I've served loyally for over 25 years. Angry that the faculty are portraying the 47 individuals as being underperforming. How disingenuous of them. It was with dismay that we learnt that we had been selected on very narrow and spurious research metrics, and that our contributions to teaching have not been considered in any way, shape or form, yet we are employed on teaching and research contracts. We'll come back to the comment on metrics later, but the person went on to say, in a departmental staff meeting in September 2020, staff contributions to teaching were discussed. My teaching load was the highest in the department by far. It was 3 times the average and more than twice that of the staff member with the next highest load. Yet this contribution has been entirely ignored in the decision-making process regarding redundancy. I know that neither my head of department nor the Dean of the School of Life Sciences were involved, consulted or even informed about the staff members selected for redundancy. In a professional development review in 2019 with my then head of department, I was told that Project SHAPE would benefit academics like myself because there would be an integration of teaching and research and that teaching contributions would be better recognised. So I think this raises a few important questions. What we know from the people who've been contacted by the university regarding their redundancies, and to a degree from the university itself, is that they have discussed using 2 criteria. So in the public statement from March, the university said, firstly, we used a measure of research income over a 5-year period to identify colleagues who may potentially be placed at risk of redundancy, although it should be noted that anyone employed at or below 0.2 FTE or who was appointed or promoted later than 2016 was not in scope. At this point, a range of factors that might remove colleagues from the pool of those potentially at risk were considered, including the contribution of positive citation metrics where appropriate. So the first question for me here is, when the university launched Project SHAPE, they had talked about the prioritisation of teaching. They said, the plans aim to deliver world-class research-connected teaching and to deliver scientific research excellence with societal impact. This will provide the very best environment for tomorrow's students. They specifically prioritise teaching. But these criteria, if indeed they are the only criteria to be used, do not account for any teaching contributions. In fact, you could argue that the more time an academic has spent investing their energy into teaching and supporting students, the less time they've had to apply for grants and write papers that will be highly cited, and the more at risk they might now be at. Now, we don't know if the university are only using these as starting criteria and will go on to consider teaching, because there's been a lack of transparency so far on how this process is going. The university say this is due to confidentiality purposes, saying in their statement, the university has maintained confidentiality around the proposals being discussed within collective consultation, but given the inaccuracies circulating publicly about these proposals, we have decided to release further information on the key issues being discussed.
Surely you don't need confidentiality from the people whose jobs you're talking about, though. I mean, publicly, sure, but when you tell the people involved these are the criteria that we're using, you don't. They'd be bound by whatever confidentiality agreement is in their contract anyway.
Yeah.
And do we know that they haven't been told then?
So obviously there is some, we don't have a full understanding. As far as I can see, no academic has released the letters or emails or discussions that they've had publicly. They obviously would be bound by their own rules to not make some of those things publicly. I do think some of those things obviously have been raised with the unions, and some information has been put into various different open letters where these things have been shared behind the scenes among researchers, presumably. So we can make a few assumptions, but from the outside, we don't have certainty. I think confidentiality is important, and it's why I'm choosing to share only what is already public. I also think if staff are aware of their personal risk of redundancy, they deserve to know the full criteria. So either they have been made aware of the full criteria and it is only these 2, because this is a big focus of all the discussions around it, or they haven't been made aware of the full criteria and are left with uncertainty and anxiety. If the university are going on to consider teaching, it doesn't seem like they've made that clear to the people who are at risk.
Yeah. Either way, that doesn't work out terrifically well, does it? There's either more criteria they haven't told them about, or they are only considering the 2 criteria that have already been discussed. Now, either way, that sucks.
Yeah. I would hope that these 47 do have a little bit more information than we have in the public, but it's clear that at least some of these people believe it is down only to the 2 criteria that the university has said are their criteria: grant income and citation metrics. Grant income probably speaks for itself. As I've described earlier in this piece, as a researcher, you are constantly having to apply for grants, bring in money to fund your research, to fund the salaries of your researchers, to fund the costs of that research. And the university wants to see its staff bringing in as many grants as possible. But citation metrics probably isn't immediately obvious what that is. And even to me, it isn't necessarily obvious what that is, because there are different types of metrics that you can use. And currently, we don't know a great deal about what citation metrics are being used by the university. The university haven't publicly said what citation metrics that they are using. But two of the people who've identified themselves anonymously as at risk of redundancy have mentioned the SciVal field-weighted citation impact. And the same metric is mentioned in an open letter from the University of Liverpool academics in support of these 47 members of staff. So it's probably reasonable to assume that it has been communicated to some of the staff that this is part of the citation metrics method that they're using, this SciVal field-weighted citation impact. So SciVal are an analytics service from Elsevier, an academic publisher who probably deserve their own segment on the podcast. The field-weighted citation impact of a researcher is the ratio between the total citations received on the person's published output, so papers that the person has published, and the total citations that would be expected based on the average in that particular subject field. So you get fluctuation on citations based on the field that you're in. So it's trying to account for those discrepancies between fields.
Right. So if you're in a very common field, then you'd imagine that the best papers in there would be very, very highly cited. Whereas if you're off in a very narrow niche where you're basically the only person in the world looking at it, then understandably not many people are going to cite you because there's not enough people in that field to cite you.
Exactly, yeah. So a ratio of 1 means you're receiving a number of citations within the average of academics within your field. A ratio of above 1 means you're receiving more citations than average, and below 1 means you're receiving less than average. An open letter from the wider academic community says, these metrics, being in the bottom 25% of the Russell Group for the average grant income, or 20% for lecturers, and a Scopus field weighted index below 2, are defined in such a way as they will always capture a large proportion of staff. Someone has to fall below these cutoffs, no matter how good everyone is. Now, I can't find an official source for what the field weighted citation impact cutoff is, but I've seen a few different sources, including this open letter and a few other news articles on the topic, using the number as 2. Now, I don't want to say that the university is using the number of 2 as their cutoff, but that seems to be a number that a lot of different sources are coalescing around. So it seems plausible to assume that that might be the cutoff for that criteria. If the field-weighted citation impact must be above 2, that means researchers must be cited twice as often as the average researcher in their field, which for me is an astonishingly high cutoff.
Yeah, because I mean, and you'd imagine that the average is there are the very, very stellar people and there are the people who are not very productive at all, and those balance out to an average, and you're saying you have to be twice as much as the average.
And one would imagine that there's probably, and this is utter speculation for me, but there's probably a normal distribution of averages across that. I wonder how much of the tip of the bell curve that actually takes into account.
Yeah. What percentage of people in that field are likely to be above twice the average?
Yeah.
One thing experts in these metrics agree on is that there are issues with using these metrics to consider staff redundancies. So in an article for the Times, higher education experts in research metrics, Ishmael Raffal, Ludo Waltman, Sarah Derica, and Paul Wouters, all at the Centre for Science and Technology Studies at the leading university, say that the proposal seriously contravenes the principles of ethical and responsible use of research metrics, as is stated in the Leader Manifesto, but also in the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, DORA, which Liverpool is signed up to. They go on to say, we regard the application of quantitative metrics in a mass redundancy as a major threat for recent initiatives on responsible research metrics, the leading authors say. And this article also says that it would make Liverpool the first university in Europe to do this. This was outlined in a letter that was sent to the Liverpool branch of the University and College Union in support of the 47. And that letter is also available on this website, and we can link the website in the description for this episode. Meanwhile, Professor Moher of the University of Ottawa, again, I might be pronouncing his name incorrectly. I am very sorry.
I thought you were going to worry about pronouncing the word Ottawa. So no, it's definitely Ottawa. You've nailed that first time.
Yeah.
How have I pronounced it wrong? How should it be pronounced?
No, I'm saying you've got it right. Because you went
good.
Ottawa, and I'm probably pronouncing his name wrong.
Oh.
All right, okay.
It's Ottawa, as in something that is a bit more like an otter.
Yes.
That's what it was named after, because there was a place nearby that was just very, very busy with otters, but this one was even Ottawa.
So Professor Moher, whose name I may be mangling, said, inappropriate use of research metrics incentivizes poor science, corner cutting and data massaging while creating insecure, untrustworthy and low morale research cultures. But the universities say that their use of metrics is okay. In their statement from early in March, they say, we are aware that concerns have been raised about the methodology used to inform the proposals. Specifically, these include claims that the proposed criteria are in breach of the San Francisco Declaration of Research Assessment, to which the university is a signatory. The university strongly refutes these claims, which in no way reflect the detailed consideration that has been given to the difficult process of identifying individuals who may be placed at risk of potential redundancy. We've adopted criteria that are fair, reasonable, non-discriminatory, and take account of the many different ways in which individuals contribute in their roles. They go on to say that DORA does not preclude the use of metrics, but sets out principles to prevent the inappropriate use of metrics. The university's own transparent guidelines on the responsible use of metrics reflecting the aspirations of DORA can be found at this link. The proposals put forward in this instance are consistent with this approach, which to me highlights the need for absolute transparency on this. Maybe the university are right. Maybe they've used these criteria correctly, but that is up for debate because they haven't outlined exactly how these decisions have been made.
Yeah.
So what next? This story is taking off in a big way. As was outlined in the Times Higher Education article, Liverpool are potentially real trailblazers here in using these criteria to make redundancies. This has never been done before. And the academic community across Europe are not happy. So far, the open letter from the University of Liverpool academics has 567 internal signatures and a number of external signatures. A second letter from people outside of the university has over 2,500 signatures from around the world. And a third letter specifically focusing on how these criteria can create inequalities has almost 200 signatures. That letter states, as it stands, the chosen metrics create significant inequalities amongst staff. They lack any acknowledgement of teaching, mentoring and other key administrative roles, including equality, diversity and inclusion efforts. Their use disregards the fact that the majority of the work to improve EDI, equality, diversity and inclusion, to decolonise the curriculum, to lead on anti-racism efforts, to obtain funding for EDI posts around anti-racism, to mentor and coach early career colleagues, to widen participation and to make the university a champion of community, is built on gendered and non-white labour. But not only that, the university reputation is under threat. Several academics who had been invited to speak for the university or teach as experts on courses have indicated that they will no longer do so in solidarity with the 47 members of staff. Someone from Nottingham Trent University said, in normal circumstances, I would be absolutely delighted to visit your group and give a talk, but in protest against the threatened redundancies at your institution, I must decline. The planned redundancies are based on inappropriate metrics and are likely to bias against those particularly affected by the current pandemic. It is surprising and disappointing to see such a well-regarded university take action that directly goes against national and global efforts to improve the work culture within universities. And someone from the University of Helsinki said, I was a participant as a discussant on a course as an external expert on March 15th, 2021. However, I choose to join the front of boycotts to support the call against the planned staff cuts.
And that's a fair point, right? Because it's not like Liverpool's a tin pot university. It's very well regarded internationally as an institution. It's not like, some of these bogus institutions that we hear about handing out quack degrees.
Yeah,
it's very well regarded.
Yeah, it's not like John Moores. I'm joking. I used to work for John Moores. It's fine.
The university, though, seemed to be forging ahead. After a few weeks of silence, the statement that I've read large parts of already was released. In it, the university denied claims that they were risking equality, diversity and inclusion goals, stating that the university also strongly refutes any allegations of discrimination within this process. Our list of mitigating criteria included those with reduced working hours, those working part-time because of caring responsibilities, maternity, paternity and adoption leave, and long-term sickness absence.
Didn't you say it was down to like 0.2 FTE, though, was the line that they had? So if you were doing as few hours as 1 day a week, then yes. But if you were working part-time to the sense of 2.5 days a week, then you were still part of it.
Yeah, so they excluded people who had been promoted or joined after 2016 or who were on 0.2% FTE. Now, they might be saying here that they also considered reduced working time. They might be saying that was an additional mitigating condition that they considered, or they might be including the fact that they didn't consider for redundancy anybody working 0.2 FTE.
Yeah, and 0.2 FTE is 0.2 full-time employees, so essentially the equivalent of 1 day per week.
1 day a week, yeah.
Yeah. Because they've not been transparent on what their criteria are, even with these mitigating criteria that they list, they don't list what they considered. So they've said reduced working hours. It might be simply that they only considered for redundancy people working more than 0.2 FTE, which, if that's the case, is astonishing, but we don't know. They say that their analysis looked back over a 5-year period and consideration was given to activity pre and post pandemic. And again, they don't say what that consideration is. And they say further mitigation will be considered during individual consultation. Now, for me, if you're going to write a statement like this is where you list, if you've got strong criteria, you list them here. Even if you only give a few examples, it's very vague. They've just given a list of things that they say that they've considered. In the meantime, researchers at the university are understandably worried. Not only are the 47 people identified at risk now living with the uncertainty of potentially losing a long-term career in the middle of a pandemic, academics in similar positions now undoubtedly feel worried that they might be next, that their university does not support them through the peaks and troughs in their own careers. The person who I quoted earlier, the person who's one of the 47 and whose full comment you can read on the website, said, "During the period that the faculty has used to assess us, I've experienced considerable difficulties. These include the loss of my sister, becoming a carer for elderly parents and the subsequent death of my parents, divorce, and received treatment and counselling for depression. Despite these difficulties, my teaching commitments were always met without fail, and I even covered for an honours programme director during their absence with illness." It's easy for people to not feel supported by their faculty if you go through all of those things and then are considered at risk of redundancy because the claim is you are not performing well enough or to a high enough standard, when only considering a small portion of what an academic researcher must do on a daily basis. But it's not just people on those teaching and research contracts who are worried. One thing the university hasn't said anything about is how these redundancies will be handled. All of these staff will have their own PhD students and postdoctoral researchers to support. We do not know what will happen to those students and postdocs. Will they keep their positions at the university? This is certainly unclear for people in postdoctoral positions who are on fixed-term contracts that they no longer have a PI to report to, then that might be tricky. And for the PhD students, will they be transferred onto other PIs midway through their courses, or will they be expected to move if their PI manages to find a position at another university? That's a lot of uncertainty to pile on
right now, yeah.
PhD students right now. And then there's the teaching responsibilities. Will they now be split between remaining academics who also now feel that their commitment to teaching is less valuable than their commitment to writing grant applications and manuscripts for publication? All of this is currently uncertain, and it leaves the entire faculty and the academic community at large. Honestly, it has become such a big issue, reeling from treatment of these staff that, as the open letter puts it, is callous and utterly unacceptable.
Every so often I get a bee in my bonnet about something.
Oh, God, this is going to be one of those episodes, isn't it?
Yeah. Like placebos or Facebook or tracking cookies or whatever, things along those lines. Eggs. I had a big rant about eggs one show. That was good. And it might seem that these things are tantamount to somebody is wrong on the internet. And, you know, I have to go in and put that right, which is often an unhelpful position, right? And it's a position we've made fun of in the past. Notably, the last QD intro video we did, the David Attenborough video, has a joke in it about skeptics staying up all night because somebody is wrong on the internet. You know, it's a joke.
Yeah.
Since then, of course, I've learned that some autistic people can find it very difficult when a mistake or untruth goes unacknowledged, and we get quite distressed when...
A strong sense of justice.
Until it's recognized that something that was said was wrong. And as such, when Matt White wrote that someone is wrong on the internet joke for the QD video, I now, in retrospect, consider that a hate crime. And I think Matt should be cancelled forthwith.
Yep.
Anyway.
I think it was Matt who wrote that joke. I'm just trying to think. I wrote many of the jokes in that. But I think that was him.
So it can seem like the things I get worked up about are just somebody's wrong on the internet, but there's often a very real underlying harm. The widespread acceptance of a powerful placebo effect, for example, offers purveyors of pseudoscientific medicine a convenient shelter where they can claim, well, yes, of course, my quack bollocks works. It just works through the placebo effect. A position which is then bolstered by people who would otherwise be critical of pseudoscience by saying, well, we know the placebo effect is real and powerful, so homeopathy say, if it can activate that effect, then what's the problem?
It's something we encounter so much as skeptics, people, even within skepticism, making that very point.
It gives nonsense medicine a free pass because that belief that placebos have got powerful mind-body effects or whatever hand-waving bollocks du jour is. And this results in real people getting hurt because of this untrue belief being spread uncritically. On Facebook and ad tracking, I fundamentally believe that people want to maintain a level of privacy online and that the widespread use of covert data capture services and digital marketing analytics are harmful to that privacy. But it's not just about, well, folks don't want Facebook to know what porn they're looking at. It's the ability of online platforms to micro-target advertising gives them a frightening ability to directly manipulate people and popular culture. And that applies as much to changing somebody's vote as it does to convincing them to buy a product. I don't think it is a controversial statement to point out, for example, that the unexpected victories of Donald Trump and Brexit in their respective 2016 elections was likely due to the ability of those campaigns to micro-target voters through social media advertising.
Oh, certainly that was a significant contribution.
Yeah. And given how marginal those votes were, you know, it might have been the decisive contribution. And here we are now in 2021 with some of the worst rates of COVID deaths in the world as a consequence of a failure of leadership on both sides of the Atlantic, administrations that would likely not have been in place if it weren't for micro-targeted advertising. And obviously COVID would still happen and a lot of those people would have still died, but maybe I think even David Cameron would have handled the COVID pandemic significantly better than Boris Johnson did.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say. And it's the butterfly effect of all these small interventions that once you get a few years down the line, you can be in some radically different places.
And maybe I'm wrong about that, or maybe I'm overselling it, or who knows. And we've talked about those things at length before, so I'm not going to deep dive on those again today. Though I do have more on Facebook coming up in a future show, I think. Maybe. We'll see. Don't know. But today I wanted to talk about something new that I don't think we've talked about on the show before. And it's something which I've also managed to get a bee in my bonnet about. And that is Bitcoin.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if either of you know a terrific amount about Bitcoin.
A bit. Not a huge amount.
I periodically get sort of obsessed with Bitcoin and read loads and loads of articles about it because it's fucking fascinating. And the people who mine for Bitcoin are bizarre and interesting and it's amazing. But then I go long periods of not thinking at all about Bitcoin and forget entirely how it works. So at this moment in time, I don't know a lot about Bitcoin.
I know a bit. I have the opinion that I think it's probably bollocks and at best is slightly harmful bollocks and maybe more harmful than that. So we'll see where you go.
So Bitcoin is described as a decentralized digital currency, which its supporters tout as a replacement for fiat currency issued by central banks of nation states. Supporters will say that it wrests control of the supply of money away from countries and institutions and making it something which is agreed by the people by consensus, and that is a good thing. And maybe that is a good thing. Maybe it is. The history of Bitcoin is a little bit murky. Its genesis dates back to 2008 when a paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system was published on a cryptography mailing list. The claimed author of the paper was somebody named Satoshi Nakamoto, although it remains a complete mystery who this person is. Is it one person? Is it several people? We actually have no idea. There have been several purported unmaskings of the real Satoshi Nakamoto, including one I remember this unfolding at the time and being fascinated by what was going on, where it was just some poor bloke who happened to be named Satoshi Nakamoto, just by coincidence, getting doorstepped by Bitcoin fans and journalists who thought they figured it out. None of these unmaskings have actually stuck, and there is still a question mark over who or what Satoshi Nakamoto is. But the Bitcoin network that we use today was created in early 2009 when Nakamoto mined the first Bitcoins. And I'll explain what mining actually means in a minute. The Bitcoin network was very quickly then picked up by illegal online marketplaces like the Silk Road. Because being decentralized with no overall control, Bitcoin was ideal for drug dealers and other ne'er-do-wells on the Silk Road, because unlike traditional fiat currency, you couldn't get Visa or MasterCard coming in and closing you down and say, well, you're selling drugs, so obviously we're not going to let you process credit card payments. But in the 10 years that have passed since then, Bitcoin has become much more widely accepted and acceptable as a form of payment. Obviously, online gambling is still trying to hype up Bitcoin. It's a big noise. Almost every conversation that we've had with investors about the online gambling startup that I've been working for started with them asking, are we going to allow Bitcoin? Will people be able to bet in Bitcoin?
Wouldn't they need Bitcoin to actually stop fluctuating wildly from being worth 30 pence to 80 million pounds per Bitcoin and back again?
And in all honesty, that was one of the things that we struggled with was, the rapidly changing value of the money in somebody's wallet because of the volatility of Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, you could absolutely bankrupt your company, not through them particularly winning, just through them putting a Bitcoin in and then later having to take it back out again.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, will gambling sites allow Bitcoin? Any site that allows you to buy Bitcoin is almost by definition a gambling site.
There was a very famous gambling site, a Bitcoin-based gambling site called Satoshi Dice, which was basically a magic Bitcoin wallet that if you sent it Bitcoin, it would generate a random number, and depending on what that random number was, would either send you back more than you sent it or send you back nothing at all. And there were several different addresses that you could send the Bitcoin to, and those addresses had different chances of returning you Bitcoin. So there was a 50-50 address that they would flip a coin, and if the coin was heads, a digital coin, obviously, but they would flip a digital coin, and if that coin was heads, they'd send you back twice as much as you sent them. And if it was tails, they'd send you nothing and just keep your money. And it was a very, very pure form of gambling.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's still running, but it was very, very popular in its day, Satoshi Dice.
I imagine it was very successful for the person who ran it.
Well, and all you would need to do is just, tip it so that it was 41.59 instead of 50.50, and you just make money hand over fist on something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Isle of Man once declared itself to be Bitcoin Island. And last time I visited the island, there were still pubs where you could go to where you could pay for your pint in Bitcoin.
Yeah, only if you were wearing a fedora.
Although by the time you'd finished your pint, it was, it was the most expensive pint you'd ever drunk because of the change the value of Bitcoin. There was a friend of mine even ordered a pizza and paid for it in Bitcoin back in the day. This was like 2012, 2013, something like that. There was a guy who bought a pizza with what was now something like £56,000 worth of Bitcoin, but back then was literally the price of a pizza. And of course, Bitcoin has hit the news again over the last few weeks when internet knob Elon Musk purchased $1.5 billion of Bitcoin through his car company Tesla and announced that Tesla were going to start accepting Bitcoin as payment for cars. So what actually is a Bitcoin, and what does mining a Bitcoin mean? Obviously, nobody is out there with a shovel and a pick like it's fucking Snow White, right? It's what do we mean when we actually say mining a Bitcoin? So Bitcoin, like several other cryptocurrencies, is based on a data structure known as a blockchain. And a blockchain is a software structure that can provide a verifiable ledger of transactions. Verifiable in the sense that each transaction or group of transactions, which is known as a block, depends upon the result of the previous block. And it's funny as a software person watching people get worked up about blockchains because it is just a software structure. It's just a data structure that you might deploy on, a project for various different reasons. It's like watching people go, oh, The linked list is the future. It's like, no, it's just a data structure, mate. It's not that big a deal. So each block in a blockchain is derived from the previous block, which itself was derived from the block before it, which itself was derived from the block before that, and so on and so forth, which gives blockchain some useful and interesting properties. So, for example, if we created a transaction where I said I was going to pay Alice 5 SWAC coins.
Are you launching a cryptocurrency, Mike? Is
launching
this what
a crypto.
Is?
This is what this is. This is.
I know you're out of work, but don't become a crypto scammer.
Stealth marketing. We could record in a block on a blockchain that 5 SWAC coins had been removed from my balance and 5 SWAC coins were added to Alice's balance. And then on top of that, we would create another block with different transactions in, and another block on top of that with more transactions in, and so on and so forth. But if I then decide, you know what, it's been a while since I sent Alice a load of SWAC coins, and she hasn't really used them, and she's only going to spend them on dog food and Pokemon anyway, so fuck it, you know what, I'm going to have them back. I'm going to go into the block where it is recorded that I have paid her, because it's just a digital file, isn't it? I'm going to go into the block and I'm going to change it so that I just sent her 1 coin, not 5, or I sent her 0, or she sent me coins, or whatever. I'm just going to go in and go to fool with a transaction.
Go on, rob Alice.
And if I do that, not only do I have to update the block where my transaction was stored, I also have to update every subsequent block, because each block depends upon the result of the previous block. So if I want to go back and change history, I then have to also change every block that was created since, every block that was created subsequently. But that's not a big deal, right? Because computers are fast, and I could just quietly update all of those blocks, and no one will ever be the wiser, and I've scammed Alice out of a load of SWAC coins for whatever reason I sent them to her in the first place.
Yeah, just open up Notepad, drag it in, few changes, done.
Dead easy, isn't it? Well, this is where the idea of proof of work comes in. So in cryptography, we have this concept called a hashing function. This is a piece of code which takes some data as input. It doesn't really matter what it is, just a series of bits. And we take that data and we process it in such a way that the output now appears to be random, and in no way does it resemble the input. For example, if I were to take a message like donate to Mercy Skeptics on Patreon, patreon.com/Mercy Skeptics, and push that through a popular hash function, the hash that comes out the other end is 8970591568B35 and so on. A string of apparently random digits, 64 characters long in this case for SHA-256, which is Secure Hash Algorithm 256. It's always 64 characters long with 256 bits. And it doesn't matter how long the input is. I could put a 10 megabyte file through this. It's always going to be 64 characters when it comes out the other side. I could put 1 bit through it. It's always going to be 64 characters when it comes out the other side, because it's a mathematical transformation.
What? I don't understand that, but carry on.
Well, it doesn't matter how much data you put into the function. What comes out is 64 characters long. It kind of works like a modulo operator, like it wraps around, it carries.
Oh, okay. So like a kind of an old-fashioned thing that had a carriage wheel in it, and the wheel would turn, and eventually the wheel would start turning on what you'd already done. I can understand a bit more now. Okay.
But the interesting thing about a hashing function is that it is a one-way process. If I were to give you the hash of a piece of data, like the one I've just read out, 8970, blah, 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 there is no way for you to easily figure out what the original data was. It gives you no clues about that original message at all, because it looks just like random data. You don't even know how long it was, because it could have been 10 megabytes, it could have been 1 bit. You've got no clue. So it is very, very hard to take a hash value and work backwards to figure out what the input was that might have created that hash. And just to demonstrate that, and this was a coincidence of a happy little piece of serendipity, in the message that I read out before, donate to Mercy Skeptics on Patreon, patreon.com/Mercy Skeptics, which I said hash to 897051, blah, blah, blah. I made a typo in that message when I computed the hash.
Oh, what a dick.
If you type out that message and push it through SHA-256, you won't get the hash that I've just read out, or indeed anything close to it, because of that small typo that I made when I computed the hash first time round. I'll publish the full hash in the show notes, and we'll see if listeners can figure out what the typo was. But that's really hard to do.
Okay.
Because hash functions are made to be a one-way transformation. If you start with the output, it's next to impossible to get back to the input again. But a given input will always produce the same output. So how does this apply to Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining? So a Bitcoin block is a collection of transactions moving Bitcoin from one wallet to another. And you take all of these transactions and you pass them through a hash function. Specifically, the hash function is the same one we've talked about, SHA-256, and that results in a hash, which is a unique representation of that block. However, not every hash is acceptable to the Bitcoin network. In order to make it difficult to create new blocks, the Bitcoin protocol mandates that the hashed value of the block must contain a specific number of zeros at the beginning. At the time of writing, there happens to be 19 zeros. So whatever hash value your block generates, it's got to begin with 19 zeros. But if the same input always gives the same output, how can you generate a different hash for the same block? Well, the answer here, much to the chagrin of British cryptographers, is that you have to introduce a nonce.
Really?
A nonce in cryptography refers to a number you use once, although it's obviously got very different connotations in common British slang. But you add this number into the mix. So you take your collection of transactions, you stick this number in there as well, and generate a hash value. Does that hash value now have 19 zeros at the beginning? Probably not. So generate another random number and stick that in instead. Does it now begin with 19 zeros? Probably still not. So keep doing that until eventually, by chance, just by dumb luck, you'll hit on a random number that when you add it to your block of transactions, it hashes to a value beginning with 19 zeros.
So you've got to work through quite a lot of nonces.
Yes, you do. Just by coincidence. And this is what we mean by Bitcoin mining. It is repeatedly hashing a block over and over again with different nonce values in order to see if it produces the result that you want, which right now, as I say, is a number that begins with 19 zeros. So you repeatedly hash the block until it produces the correct result. And when it eventually does, all you need to do is publish the number. You say, I've solved the block. Here is the number. You announce to the network, this is the number that solves this block. And anyone can then very quickly take the same group of transactions, add in the number that you have published, and see that the hash begins with 19 zeros. So they can verify very quickly, very easily, that you are the one who has come up with this number, because you are the one who's announced, I found out what the number is. The magic number is this. That solves this particular block. And that's what is referred to as proof of work. Being the first to publish the number demonstrates that I put in the hard work to find out what that number was. And I hit on the right answer before anybody else did. It demonstrates that I put the work in, that I rolled the quindecillion-sided dice and I rolled the 6.
Yeah, like those programs that look for the highest possible prime number, and they're always kind of looking for the next one kind of thing.
Yeah. And as a reward for that, not only are the transactions in that block committed to the blockchain, so Alice gets my 5 SWAT coins, but also I am given fresh, new, shiny Bitcoin, so not coming from someone else's wallet, just magicked into existence. I'm given a fresh, new, shiny Bitcoin as a reward for solving the block. And right now that reward is 6.25 Bitcoin. It used to be more than that. Every N period of time, I don't remember what it is, it halves until eventually they'll get down to 0.
And then nobody will find any more Bitcoins.
And then there will be 21 million Bitcoins in the world, never any more, never any less. So let's go back to my imaginary scenario where I've decided to go back and edit a transaction in order to take back the coins that I sent to Alice, foolishly, not realizing she was just going to spend it on chickpeas and blankets or whatever it is that Alice likes.
Nail varnish.
When I edit the block with the transaction is, not only do I have to change my transaction, but I also have to work out a new nonce that now solves the block, because the inputs of the block are different. And because the output of the hash function is effectively random, the old nonce is now no help to me at all. I have to start again from scratch. I have to start generating random numbers again from scratch as if it was a brand new block. And even if I manage to solve the block, because the next block is based on the hash of the previous block, I now have to solve the next block again as well. And the next block, and the next block, and the next block. I have to keep finding new values, solve that, new values, solve that, and so on and so forth. So in order to change the ledger, in order to change the history of the transactions, I need to wield a significant amount of computing power, more than the rest of the network, which is, of course, continuing to add blocks onto the end of the chain. And this is just me on my own trying to do this while the whole of the rest of the world is adding to the chain at the other end.
There's a quick question about the chain, and maybe you're going to come to this, but the problem with a chain is it's linear. What happens when 50 people try to add the next link to the chain? How do you then carry the chain on?
The way it works is longest chain wins. So if the chain forks, if the chain branches, people are going to be working on both tips of that chain, if you like, trying to generate a block to go on the end of them, and whichever one adds the next block on next. Okay, you've got 2 blocks on your fork. This guy's got 1 block on that fork. So the 1 block goes away and the two blocks wins.
But then don't a lot of transactions that were attached to that other fork get lost?
They don't get lost. They'll just have to go into another subsequent block.
Okay.
So it's like, all right, and so now we need to pick up the transactions that were in the block that we've aborted and resolve those in a future block.
Isn't that going to be a problem when your theory is that you're selling Teslas, and so you might be selling thousands and thousands of Teslas, so there might be thousands of branching things that all need to be resolved into one. Meanwhile, you're still selling Teslas on many of those different branches.
And the way Bitcoin is set up is that the network is designed so that on average it takes 10 minutes to solve a block. Sometimes it's slower than that, sometimes it's faster than that, but this is not a fast way of processing a transaction. So if you buy a Tesla with Bitcoin, that block has got to be well mined and in the history before Elon's going to hand the Tesla over.
So you just see the little spinny circle as your transaction's going through, but you stand there for 10 minutes waiting for it to happen.
At least, yeah.
Okay.
All of which effectively means that Bitcoin transactions cannot be edited. And the older a block is, the more work you need to do to try and change it. So the properties of the blockchain structure and the proof of work system not only allows me to demonstrate that I solved the problem, but it also means that my solution does not make it any easier for someone else to resolve a similar problem. And the Bitcoin network is designed to constantly tune and retune how hard it is to solve a block. Effectively, the way they do that is by changing how many zeros there has to be at the start of the hash function. So it doesn't matter how much computing power is thrown at the problem, it will always take 10 minutes on average for the network to solve a block. Because if you throw more computers at it, they just add more zeros on the start of the required hash function. But this is the rub, right? Because computing time is not free. Even assuming that you already own the computer, you need to pay for the electricity to run it. And we've talked on the show in the past about computers will use more electricity to do more computation work. If your computer's sitting there idle, it uses less power than if it's sitting there working hard. In 2015, a report in The Guardian said that data centers use as much carbon as the entire airline industry. That was 6 years ago. And data center use has increased since then. The airline industry probably hasn't increased all that much.
No, it's probably gone down slightly.
And data centers are working on this, don't get me wrong. You know, we're going to be carbon neutral by 2030, we're going to be carbon negative by 2050, whatever. And you know, they're looking at renewables, they're looking at sequestration, you know, they say, we're doing wind, we're doing solar. Apple have got data centers out in the Arizona desert that are entirely solar powered. You know, the data center folks are working on this. And that's awesome, it really is. But the climate crisis is here now, today. The 2016 Paris Agreement aims to limit the impact of CO2 emissions to an increase of 1.5 C in mean global temperatures in the ideal case, or 2 C in the worst case. And even if these targets are met, it will result in significant damage to global ecosystems, loss of habitat, and extinction for many species.
And mass migration of people as well.
Climate models from the IPCC predict that we are on target for something closer to a 3 to 4 C rise by the year 2100, which will render large areas of the planet unlivable, uninhabitable. And that was a sobering statistic when I read that. For somebody who works in software, a statistic that I very much took to heart. But software developers are in a very privileged position of being able to have an outsized influence over and above our own personal carbon footprints, because we can make decisions on behalf of thousands or millions of customers. If the software we design is made to be more efficient, it will use less electricity and therefore less carbon. And there are several techniques that we can use for that. You know, the static pre-renders, efficient server-side rendering, pre-zipping content, serverless architectures like Cloud Functions or Lambda. And I know people don't know what any of this means, and that's okay. The only point is that there are a suite of tools and techniques that we can use to reduce the amount of power it takes to make our software run. Efficient code in the browser will use less battery, so customers don't have to charge devices as often. Obviously, efficient code on the server means the data center will be using less power. Smaller payloads will allow operating systems to power down the radios faster. Developers can be making green choices in the software that we make, and I think that's not only important, but it's also not on most software developers' radars at the moment. That can we be thinking green when we're coding? And against all of that backdrop, you've got Bitcoin, which is burning compute time to repeatedly and randomly guess numbers to see if they validate a new block.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions of times a second.
And the vast majority of which just do nothing.
Yeah. Data centers use a lot of power. That's not a surprise. You know, there's a lot of data centers in the world, but the Bitcoin network uses half as much energy on top of what the data centers already use. And I want to dwell on that for a moment. Every data center in the world, every website, every application backend, every enterprise installation, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, all of them take their power consumption and 50% on top of that just for the Bitcoin.
And I've seen people make the point that, yes, but what is the power consumption of all of the banks and all of the internet banking that we do and all of that, all the transactions everyone does? And surely that's going to be a huge chunk. And that kind of misses a fundamental point for me, that all of that achieves something.
Indeed.
Whereas the vast majority of the Bitcoin stuff doesn't achieve any. There are barely any transactions, literally speaking, in Bitcoin compared to the entire world's financial infrastructure. It's not a fair comparison.
And indeed, a single Bitcoin transaction has got a carbon footprint equivalent to 750,000 Visa credit card payments. You know, it's incredibly inefficient. So the Bitcoin network, at the time of writing, uses more electricity annually than Argentina.
Jesus. That thing about a Bitcoin transaction uses as much as 750,000 Visa credit card. Do you know what that is in terms of actual stuff burned? In terms of actual, if you had a pile of wood or coal or whatever and burnt it? Because that'd be really interesting to know what the tangible burning quality of a single Bitcoin transaction would be.
I don't off the top of my head, but I do know that the Bitcoin network as a whole produces an amount of carbon equivalent to about 11 million cars, which is an obscene amount of carbon. So the Bitcoin network uses more electricity than Argentina, and that's a whole lot of carbon burnt into the sky for work that is deliberately unproductive, because every block which hashes to the wrong value was a waste of time. It is absolutely useless. Bitcoin is a climate crime. This is a phrase that my Twitter followers might have seen me use once or twice recently. And this isn't a new argument. People have been shouting about the carbon footprint of Bitcoin for years, but that footprint just keeps getting bigger. Bitcoin's current carbon footprint is estimated to be equivalent to that of the whole of Ireland. The whole country of Ireland, the entire carbon output of Ireland, is the same as Bitcoin. In 2018, the journal Nature Climate Change published an article which says that Bitcoin emissions alone could be the factor which pushes global warming above that 2C threshold mentioned in the Paris Agreement. That's not to say that it will. It's not to say that if we killed off Bitcoin, then we definitely would meet that target or whatever, but it might be the factor which actually pushes us over that 2C threshold.
And what a stupid way to end humanity.
Yeah.
What an absolutely ludicrous way to bring an end to civilization, as the civilization that we know, and to sort of presage on the crisis even further through the dumbest way possible.
And folks are going to write in about this. People listening to the show, they're going to write in, they're going to complain, they're going to, Mike, you got it wrong. They're going to write in and say, Mike, if we mine Bitcoin with green power, with renewable power, that's okay. And it's like, yeah, right, but you're not, are you? Bitcoin is still overwhelmingly being powered by fossil fuel. And even if you are mining Bitcoin with green power, that is unproductive use of green power. It's still unproductive. Power is still unproductive. That's still power that could have been used for something else, somewhere else, but instead you used it to brute force hashes.
What should happen here is, seen as fucking Elon Musk has got on board with Bitcoin, if he's so fond of sending useless things up into space, what he needs to do is send a data center up into space and run it directly off solar while up there, and just have this useless little blob of computing power just endlessly churning out meaningless numbers and throwing them away, while at least being run directly from sunlight that doesn't have to come to us first. It might be the best thing Elon Musk could do for humanity at this point, is to just stop adding less to humanity.
And it's a strange point with Elon Musk, because Elon Musk has got reasonably decent climate credentials. You know, it's one of the things that he touts about Tesla is he says we're doing electric cars because fossil fuels are damaging the planet. He received a $1.5 billion green energy grant not too long ago. And then, oddly enough, spent $1.5 billion buying Bitcoin, the same amount of money that he received in the green energy grant, you know?
It's almost as if he's not committed to it purely from an ideological sense that he wants to make the world a better place.
And folks are also going to write in and they're going to say, yes, Mike, but banks, but ending state control, ending coercion, but the free market, and yeah, all that's great stuff. But burning the planet into the sky to prove that no one gets to tell you what to do is at best counterproductive. And even if I agreed with the ends, I don't think they're justified by the means. So, Skeptics in the Pub Online, events are still continuing. They're running. They're going ahead. It still is the brilliant and awesome project that it is. And if you're interested, events are running every Thursday at twitch.tv/SITP.
Yeah, at 7 p.m. every Thursday. Yeah.
7 p.m. every Thursday. Lots of brilliant speakers coming up. I mean, we should go through what they are, but it's a long show already. So there's also Skeptic Magazine.
Well, there is also The Skeptic. We recommend people go to The Skeptic. Skeptic Magazine is also publishing regularly, but if you've enjoyed what we've done in this show, I'd recommend you go to The Skeptic rather than Skeptic Magazine.
I see what
if
you
you've
mean,
hated what we've done in the show in pretty much every single segment, maybe you should go to Skeptic Magazine. That's probably a better home for you.
So The Skeptic, brackets, UK Magazine, close brackets, which is the name of our Wikipedia page. We're publishing content on a regular basis, and you can find that at skeptic.org.uk. Aside from that, then, I think that is literally all we got time for. Fucking long show.
I think so.
All that remains then is we thank Marsh for coming along today.
Cheers.
And thank you to Alice.
Thank you.
We've been Skeptics with a K, and we will see you next time.
Bye now.
Bye.
Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society. For more information, visit our website, www.merseysideskeptics.org.uk, or email podcast@merseysideskeptics.org.uk.